John, you got the refrigerator in here. I said, you got it like. Well, I'll be in here, I'm good.
What do you think, John, if I put on my dress slippers? You guys can hear it?
not yet. We're waiting for the state. We are here in the case, are we on? Ladies and gentlemen, we are here in the case of State of Ohio versus Lonnie Sheets, case number 20 CR 76. Those of you sitting in the jury box and the other seats have been summoned as prospective in this case. Folks, I apologize. The first group of jurors, that went a little longer than we thought. And then in between jurors, we are cleaning the courtroom as well. So it went a little slower than I anticipated. At this time, I will have the state and then the defense do their introductions.
Hello, my name is Chris Kinsler with the Ohio Attorney General's Office, Special Prosecution Section. Seated next to me is Colleen Williams. She's an assistant prosecutor for Jackson County, Ohio, and will be representing the state of Ohio.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Toy. I'm an attorney in Athens, Ohio. Come over here and 9 other different counties in southeast Ohio. The associate here is Andy Grillo. He's from Benton County. My client is Lonnie Sheets. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to have everyone raise their right hand and I'll give you your oath as a prospective juror. Do you swear or affirm that you will truly and fully answer all questions put to you by the court or counsel in this case, and this you do as you shall answer under God or under penalty of perjury? If so, say I do. Thank you very much. You can put your hands down. Your service as a juror is extremely important. Our legal system cannot function without you, and I appreciate you taking the time and effort to come in today. In a criminal case, the state of Ohio claims that the defendant has committed crimes. In the court, a defendant is notified of the charges by receiving a document called the indictment. This is the document that contains the allegations of the criminal charge. In most criminal cases, the jury is concerned only with whether the crime or crimes have been committed. The jury is not involved in sentencing and punishment. The judge determines all sentences based upon the Ohio law. The fact that a person is charged with a crime does not mean he is guilty. By law, a defendant is presumed innocent at all times during a trial. A person is to be found guilty only if that person's guilt is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The state must prove every element of reasonable doubt. The state of Ohio and the jurors who approach this case with open minds and agree to keep their minds open until a verdict is reached. Jurors must be as free as from bias, prejudice, or sympathy, and not influenced by preconceived ideas either as to the facts or as to the law. You are all undoubtedly qualified to serve as a juror. However, there may be something that could disqualify you in this particular case. At this time, the court and counsel will ask you questions. These questions are not designed to pry into your personal affairs, but to discover if you have any knowledge of this case, if you have any preconceived opinion you cannot lay aside, or if you have had any experience that might cause you to identify yourself with either party. These questions are necessary to ensure that each party has an impartial juror. Now, at any time I ask you a question that you feel might involve someone of a hand, let me know, and counsel and I and you will go into the jury room and discuss that privately. There's no right or wrong answer to any of these questions. The right answer is what you truly feel. Now, to be a good juror, I think you need to have a willingness to be fair and impartial, a willingness to follow the law, and a willingness to use common sense. Can everyone do that? Okay. Now, you were all waiting in the hall for a bit before I brought you in here. Now, I understand there may have been some folks who are watching the earlier jury selection on some type of cell phone or other device. Did anyone see that? Did anyone hear what was being broadcast? While you were sitting in the hallway, did you hear any discussion by anyone else in the hallway about this case? Okay, for the record, no juror has answered in the affirmative to any of those. I will give you the law that will tell you how you decide this case. If you're selected as a juror and we get to the end of the case, I give you the jury instructions. You're required to follow those instructions. Can everyone do that? Right? In our criminal justice system, the filing of an indictment means nothing. That's just what starts the case. The defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant has a constitutional right to remain silent. The state has to prove each and every element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Does anyone have a problem with any of those concepts? You're going to hear the term reasonable doubt a great deal. And I'm going to give you what that definition is. You'll hear it again when I give you the final jury instructions. But the attorney is going to talk to you during this process of selecting jurors about doubt is present when jurors, after they have carefully considered and compared all of the evidence, cannot say they are firmly convinced of the truth of the charge. It is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. Reasonable doubt is not mere possible doubt because everything relating to human affairs, depending on moral evidence, is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof of such character that an ordinary person would be willing to rely and act upon it in the most important of that person's own affairs. Can everyone accept that definition? Has anyone served on a jury previously? We have one hand. Yes, sir. And would you tell me what your name is?
Robert Farr.
Okay. And the jury you served on, was it in Jackson County?
Yes.
Okay. Was it in this courtroom?
Yes.
What kind of case was it?
It was a rape case.
Okay. Do you remember when that was?
In quite a few years ago.
Okay. Probably Judge Hosaffel was the judge for that.
Really can't remember.
Okay. Is there anything about that prior service as a juror that makes you feel you couldn't be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
No.
Okay. And you can put aside the facts in that previous case and just decide this case and what you're going to hear in this courtroom.
Yes.
What was the finding of the jury in that case? Has anyone been a victim of crime? No one? Now, have any of you been charged with a crime ever? I don't mean speeding tickets. Okay. No one? Has anyone had a family member who's been charged with a crime?
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
In the past, my half brother was charged
Okay.
in Cleveland area years ago.
Anything that you had that half-brother who was charged up in Cleveland, anything about that experience make you feel you couldn't be a fair and impartial juror?
No.
Okay. And because of that experience, you wouldn't favor either side in this case?
No.
Okay. Now, the attorneys may ask you some more questions about that. Anyone friends with law enforcement? Who have friends who work in law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, that usually gets a few hands. Okay. I will work from left to right. Ma'am, state your name for me.
Miranda Eggers.
Okay. Ms. Eggers, who are your friends in law enforcement?
Well, my coworker's fiance is the chief of police in Oakdale.
Okay.
He and I aren't super close, but I know him through her.
All right. How long have you known him?
Oh goodness, maybe a year.
Do you socialize together?
Not really.
Okay. So would you describe him as a friend or an acquaintance?
An acquaintance would probably be better.
Okay. Now, don't tell me if he's what he said, but has he talked to you about this case? No? Okay. All right. Then the gentleman sitting next to you. Sir, what is your name?
Walter Miller.
Okay. And who are you friends with in law enforcement?
My father's a probation officer.
Okay. Who's your father?
Nate Miller.
Sure, I know Nate. Now, he's not involved in this case.
Correct.
Now, is the fact your relationship with, the fact your father's a probation officer with municipal court, am I correct?
Yes.
That cause you to favor the state in this case?
No.
Okay. And the defense, they're not starting behind the 8 ball with you, are they?
No.
Okay. So you can be fair and impartial?
Correct.
All right. I saw, yes, sir. Again, you state your name for the record.
Dennis Sherwood.
Okay. Who do you know in law
I
enforcement?
have a sister that's a police officer in Orange, out east of Cleveland, and I have a cousin that's a police officer in Cleveland.
Anything about the fact you've got that type of law enforcement going to make you favor the state?
No.
And the defense isn't starting out behind the 8 ball with you, are they?
No.
Okay. And I think okay. Sir, and in the back, if you, okay. Who do you know in law enforcement?
A number of them locally, Mr. Frazier, his dad, Mr. Potter, Scott Conley, a number of officers in the area.
So it sounds like you know quite a few of local law enforcement officers.
Yes, sir.
Because you have that connection, are you going to favor the state in this case?
No.
Okay. Probably when the state is asking you questions, they're going to go over the names of the officers who are going to testify, and they're going to follow up with you on that issue a little bit. All right? Ma'am, state your name.
Kelly Franco.
Okay.
My father was a Wilson police officer, who is now passed away.
Okay, and who's your dad?
Damon Hill.
Okay.
And my uncle was the sheriff for Jackson County, with Sabre.
Sure.
I have 2 cousins that state patrolmen. They may probably retire by now.
Okay.
And my son's fiance, on that side of our family, her stepfather was chief of police up in Sabina, Ohio.
All right. So you've got a lot of law enforcement connections in your family.
Well, it's been 10 years ago,
Yeah.
so third.
But so because you've got that family connection with law enforcement, you're going to favor the state in this case? Okay. And the defense isn't starting out behind the 8 ball with you, are they?
I just want the truth.
Okay, and I appreciate that. All right.
Your Honor, sorry, I don't think you saw my hand.
I didn't. Thank you. And your name is?
Allison Bryant.
All right. And since you are so far back, so I make sure everyone can hear you. If you could pull your mask down, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry.
So tell me about your connection with law enforcement.
I just have a very close friend. He's a Jackson city police officer who's been a friend for years. So,
Okay. And who is that?
Charles Bach.
Okay. I don't believe Mr. Bach is going to be a witness in this case, but just the fact that you've got a very close friend who's in law enforcement, is that going to cause you to favor the state in this case? Isn't starting out behind the 8 ball with you, are they?
No.
You can be fair and impartial even though you have that connection. Okay. Did I miss any other hands? All right. Now, for this next question, you know, if people say, Judge, I'd rather not talk about this in front of everyone, again, let me know and we can go speak in the jury room. Does anyone have any physical or other issue that would make it difficult for them to be a juror? Yes, sir. State your name.
Brian Mannion,
Okay.
I have a busted eardrum in my right ear. I'm getting ready to go have surgery on.
All right. Have you been able to hear me today?
As long as I keep my head this way.
Okay.
If they're talking back here, I gotta turn my head.
All right. When is your surgery scheduled?
I actually go in on the 6th to make sure they got the infection and everything going, then they're gonna schedule the surgery.
May 6th?
Yes, this coming,
This
Thursday.
This Thursday. What time's your appointment?
uh, in Ashland,
Ashland, Kentucky.
get correct.
Okay. So by the time you chunk a Thursday morning, you're gonna be busy.
Yeah,
Okay.
this was the 3rd surgery they've done on it.
Wow. Well, hopefully this is the last one they do on
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm hoping.
Well, I hope so too. But you're telling me you got to turn basically your good ear to whoever's speaking.
Yeah, whenever they're speaking, I got muffled.
Okay.
I've only got 10% in my right ear right now.
All right. I tend to sometimes be a little loud, I'm told. But if I was to lower my voice, can you hear me right now?
I can make you out right there as long as
Okay.
I've got that ear.
All right. Now, just now, we don't make you sit in these seats all day long. We will be taking breaks, so you'll have an opportunity to get up and stretch and move. Does anyone else have any physical or other limitation that would make it difficult for them to be a juror? Okay. Now, we expect this case is going to take all of this week and potentially into next week for Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Does that create an undue hardship for anyone?
I do start a new job Monday also,
Okay, well, what new job do you start Monday?
General Mills.
All right. And they're expecting you to be there.
Yeah, my first day, hire date is Monday.
Okay. Now, have you told them that, you've been called as a prospective juror?
I just yesterday received my papers to be approved in front of my doctor because of my hearing.
Okay.
So I haven't even spoke with them since I got my papers sent into them.
So at this point, you don't know whether being a juror maybe next week would be a problem.
It probably, as far as the work, it would be a problem.
Okay.
Just starting the new job.
Right. But have you talked to them about, hey, I may be a juror, can I start
Yeah, I
Thursday?
told them that there's a possibility.
Yeah. And what did they tell you?
And they just told me to get with them and let them know.
Okay. So it's,
Because they only do hires once a month.
yeah,
And because of my hearing, I've already been put off 3 months on my hire date.
okay. Well, the attorneys may have some more questions for you about that. Sir, state your name.
Andrew Brown.
And tell me why it would be difficult for you to be here, with us this week and maybe until Wednesday of next week.
I'm a college student. I'm actually in finals week this week. I missed the final today to be here. And then I start a new semester Monday in Logan that's hands-on. I'm an operating engineer locally with my new semester with my degree.
Okay. So you missed one final today. You've got others this week?
Yeah, Thursday is my next one.
All right. And how long does that final go for?
My class is 3 hours long. It starts at 12:30 and goes to 3:20.
Do you know if there's any way your professor the testing schedule for the fact that you might be a juror here?
I can email and ask because I let the same professor know today that I wasn't going to be in class.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure how long this was going to take. And then, like I said, Monday I start a new semester with all new classes, and it's all hands-on.
Okay. So when your new semester, do you go to school every day?
Yeah, Monday through Friday. And at local 18 training grounds for operator engineers.
Okay. So if you were to miss, maybe the first 3 days of the new semester, is that going to create
Significantly behind because it's all hands-on week class for the summer semester.
Okay. Yeah, summer semester they cram a lot in a short period of time. I remember. Okay. I'm sure the attorneys are going to want to ask you some more questions about that. Does everyone speak English? Okay, these are a series of questions I'm required to ask you. Is anyone on probation? Anyone on parole or what we call post-release control? Sometimes I've had, prospective jurors go, Judge, you just didn't ask me the right question. I kept waiting for you to ask me the question, and I would have raised my hand. Is there any reason that I haven't covered why anyone feels they couldn't be a fair and impartial juror in this case? This time, I'm going to turn over questioning to the state. Mr. Kensler?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Chris Kinsland with the state of Ohio. Myself and Ms. Williams with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office will be representing the state in this case. So the purpose of this process, jury selection, is for us to basically, being parties to the defense of the state, to kind of learn more about you guys because it's going to help us decide if you'd be a good and appropriate juror for this case. Some people will be excused during this process. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean you couldn't be a good juror, just means you're maybe not a great juror for this case. And there's a number of things that go into that. So when we're asking you questions, some of those questions may be probing or personal, but we're doing so not to be nosy. We're doing so in an effort to get to know you a little better because it helps us make a good decision and get what we want to do is panel a jury of people who can be fair and impartial in this case. And we'll talk more about that, I guess, as we go along. The other thing I would say to you up front is this says something similar, like speak now, forever hold your peace. This is the only opportunity you have to speak to myself or speak to the defense counsel and share your thoughts. I've had jurors in the past that have expressed something similar to this, where somebody like 3 days into the trial says, hey, I've got a problem. I said, well, I'm glad they brought it to my attention, but it would have been better for them and better for us if they brought it up at this stage of the game. All this is to say, don't hesitate to raise your hand, don't hesitate to respond to a question, and share your thoughts. No wrong answers, we just want to hear from you, and we'll figure it out if there's a problem or not. Okay. A number of you responded to some questions that the judge asked, and I think I kind of want to start with that. Ms. Eggers?
Yes.
And you responded, you knew some folks in law enforcement, was it just Chief Ward or was it more?
Just Chief Ward.
And is it Dave Ward?
Yes.
Talking about, and he's the chief of police in Oak Hill, is that right?
Yes.
So the case we're gonna be talking about today, he would be a witness in it. So I would anticipate that he is gonna, well, I would anticipate he's gonna testify. If he doesn't testify, he would certainly be mentioned by parties because he was involved in the case. Do you think you can be fair and impartial in evaluating his testimony if you were to take the stand?
Yes, it's really his fiance that I'm friends with.
Okay.
When we work together, we're workers.
Oh, where do you work?
West Bango.
Okay. And
Yeah.
have you ever been out to dinner with so he's engaged to a coworker
Yes.
who's also,
We don't hang, I told her, she's like a work friend.
okay.
If that makes sense.
But like, you guys don't hang out, like, he and his fiance, they don't hang out with you socially? Okay. If he were to take the stand and testify, do you believe you could evaluate him the same way you would any other witness? Basically, look at them and evaluate them the same way you would any other witness, even though you have an acquaintance with them, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else you know in law enforcement?
I mean, I've had other acquaintances over the years, really, but other than that,
Okay. Well, one of the things I want to do with everybody, and this is for all of you, I'm going to kind of rattle off some of the names you're going to hear in this case, both in terms of parties and in terms of people who will be witnesses, or their names will be prominent in the case in one way, shape, or form. The defendant who's wearing the blue short sleeve shirt over here, that's Lonnie Sheets. Does anybody know Mr. Sheets? Did any, I think the judge already asked this, but any of you know either myself or Ms. Williams or Mr. Toyer or Mr. Grillo? In addition to Lonnie Sheets, you're going to hear about some other members of the family. You're going to hear about Tabitha Sheets, Paul Sheets, Lisa Sheets. Any of those names ring a bell? You'll also hear about some members of the Yealy family. You'll hear about David Yealy, Dallas Yealy, Terry Yealy. Some additional names are Melva Bailey, Sherry Bailey, and I forgot 3 of the Sheets: Dustin Sheets, Cody Sheets, and Ryan Horner. Any of those names ring a bell? Some of the law enforcement folks I expect you to hear from will be from Jackson County Sheriff's Office, including Detective Rick Zinn, Chief Deputy Scott Connolly. I've already mentioned from Oak Hill Police Department, the Chief Dave Ward. Does that name ring any bells? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I used to be employed by the Village of Oak Hill as a pool manager, 10 years ago now.
Okay.
So I mean, like, I know the names of the Oak Hill Police, like, in passing, they would probably say hi, they would know my name, I would know theirs, but
Do you know the Chief, Dave Ward?
I know his name, yes. So, like,
Okay.
you would know me, we've been passing, when working at the pool, if we needed something, we would call whichever day he was on duty. He wasn't a chief at that point, he was just.
Okay. Anything about that past work experience with him that would cause you to be biased one way or the other if you were to testify?
No.
Do you think you could, if he took in and testify, do you think you could evaluate his testimony the same way you would anybody else's?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll also hear from PCI agents Matthew Austin and Chad Holcomb, Detective Conkle with the Sutter County Sheriff's Office. We'll also hear from some BCI lab folks, Lisa Koenig, Andrew McClellan, and Ted Benazian. They're from out of town, so those names might not mean anything to you. Also hear from a Dr. Mary Goolsby and the Dr. Elaine from Amerson. Yes, ma'am.
Dallas Healy is one of my customers at my bank.
Dallas Sealy is a customer.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you do at the bank?
I'm a teller.
Okay, and so you would recognize Dallas Sealy?
I don't see him often, it's just, I know the name. I don't think he comes to our branch a whole lot, but
Which branch do you work at?
okay.
Okay. So if Mr. Yealy were called to testify, would you be able to give a fair value to his testimony?
Yes.
So when you say he's a customer, I mean, I'm just assuming that from time to time he comes to the bank to do cash checks, deposit money, withdraw money, whatever. Would you be the person who would always be the teller when he's there, or?
Not always,
Mhm.
but I know in the past.
Beyond that interaction, do you have any relationship?
Probably not.
Okay. But what I'm hearing from that, do you think you could be fair and impartial? So that's here, okay. Some of the rest of you had a response to law enforcement. Did you have that response, sir? What was your name?
Walter Miller,
And who are you related
my
to?
father,
And what is his name?
Nate Miller,
And where does he work?
he's a probation officer.
I think the judge talked to you about this. Is he in municipal court?
Yes.
Okay.
I also work in the state,
Where do you work?
Southern Ohio Correctional Facility,
Okay. What do you
correctional officer.
do? And how long have you been there?
14,
I'm sorry?
14 years.
Okay. Anything about that experience that would lead you to compare your ability to be fair and impartial here today?
No.
Okay. Your dad, getting back to your dad, he's not gonna be a witness, and I don't think he's in any way involved in the case as far as I know. Is that relationship gonna impact your ability to be fair and impartial today? You're not gonna say favor the state because your dad works at court?
No.
Okay, same question about you working for the corrections, as a corrections officer, you're not gonna favor or have a bias in favor of that?
No.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, so did you have a question, response to one of the questions the judge asked? Was it the,
I guess in regards to knowing how,
who did you know?
I'm friends with his dad, I know Mr. Frazier, probably, and there's probably some that are escaping me that I'm not super familiar with, the business other than the community, so I've known quite a few people.
Okay, are you Mr. Anders?
Correct.
So Scott Connolly, for example, I think he's one of the names I rattle off, he might be a witness for us. How do you know him?
He is my wife's uncle's stepson, plus I've known him since he was a kid.
Okay. When was the last time you saw him?
Yesterday.
Okay. If he is called as a witness to testify, do you believe you can be fair and impartial in evaluating him?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm sorry, who were the other names you mentioned? You mentioned Sheriff Frazier as well, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, same question. If the case is investigated by his officers, is that gonna cause you to be biased in favor of the state in some way?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, you mentioned somebody else.
I'm familiar with Mr. Potter, and again, there are others that in acquaintances, and me in business.
So if in the course of our case, we call some law enforcement officers, you can be able to evaluate their testimony the way you would anyone else's. Bias in favor of believing them just because they're law enforcement. And so did you also respond to the law enforcement question?
Dennis Sherwood,
Okay, and what was your response?
I have a sister that's a police officer, and I have a cousin that's a police officer, but they're up north on Cleveland.
Okay,
And I was a corrections officer for 8 years in Hockey.
okay. So family, you have close family members who are in law enforcement. We're going to be presenting law enforcement officers as witnesses. Is that going to cause you to have bias in toward believing them or anything like that, if you hear their testimony today or that this week. And likewise, you work as a corrections officer, in fact, you work with the state at one time, is that going to cause you to be more biased in favor of the state? Is there anybody that missed that had a response to the law enforcement question?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. And you are Ms. Franco?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I did make a note, I'm sorry, you did have law enforcement family. Is anybody, any of the names that I mentioned familiar to you? And where's your family at? Or your law, who are you related to in law enforcement or friends
Oh,
with?
my father was a police officer in Austin. My uncle was the sheriff for Jackson County. My two cousins were state patrolmen, but they're, and he's retired from.
Okay. So the fact that you have these family members that either are now or were in law enforcement, is that going to cause you to be biased in favor of law enforcement? Like witnesses, you can be more inclined to trust them or believe them when they take the stand?
More inclined to trust and believe him.
Yeah.
Right now, I haven't heard anything.
Well, you should wait to hear everything. That's kind of what we're getting at, right? When we talk about, things we're talking about are kind of talking about bias. And what we would like is everybody to kind of come in this case with a clean slate, evaluate just the evidence that they hear. In a sense, that's what your job as a juror would be, is sort of ignore anything you may have seen or heard that happened outside of these walls. And kind of come into this with a clean slate. Is that something you believe you can do?
Yes, sir.
Your name, sir, is Mr. Minion?
Mannion.
I'm sorry?
Mannion.
Mannion, okay. You indicated you had some hearing loss, and I think you
Yes.
described it as, was it like 70% hearing loss? Or
Yeah.
in your right ear?
Well, yeah, I've only got 10% in my right ear that I can hear.
Okay. I think that when the judge talked to you, also indicated that you kind of have to listen out of your left ear. You got to sort of turn it.
Yeah.
We're presenting this case. I anticipate there'll be witnesses much of the time sitting here. Defense counsel will be seated there. I'll be seated over here with Ms. Williams. We may stand up to talk to them. But if the people who are speaking are over this way, either here or here, is that going to be okay for you?
It should be, yeah.
And I think the judge is going to permit, as I am right now, people who are speaking are going to be permitted to take their masks off. Is that something? Is that
Yeah, that helps.
okay? What about if I'm standing over here questioning a witness and I'm not facing you? Are you able to hear me?
It reduces it a lot.
Okay.
I can't hear these people back here. They just sound like mumbling whenever they're speaking about people they know, this and that. I can't make out the words that they're saying.
Okay. As I'm talking to you right now, are we okay?
Yeah, we're good here.
Is a part of it a product because I'm facing you right?
It's a plus. If you turn around and face that way, it reduces it a lot.
Okay. You also indicated that you have a surgery schedule.
Yeah.
And that's you're supposed to go see the doctor on the 6th,
On the
which is
6th, yeah.
Thursday, but that was like a pre-surgery meeting, is that right?
Yeah. As soon as they lose their infection, to go on, he's gonna schedule a surgery.
Okay, so that Thursday meeting with the doctor is in, where did you say it was?
It's in Ashland,
It's in Ashland, Kentucky. And what time did you say it was?
9 a.m.
Okay. And that's something that's a kind of a necessary.
Right.
If you as a jury, we anticipate this case taking a weekend more. Okay, so you'd be here through Thursday, you'd actually probably be into the next week. You can't, is this something that can be rescheduled, your Thursday appointment?
It could be, but it's just gonna put off the surgery that I needed.
And you said this is your third surgery?
Yes,
And you also had a work issue. You're starting a new job on Monday?
on Monday, yes.
Okay. And you indicated that they only start you once a month, is that right? Like, if you miss that Monday, you're gonna.
Yeah, they only do hire every month.
Okay, so I'm assuming it's for like orientation or other,
And training,
whatever else they do.
if we may, just go back. this would be me.
Okay, that's fine. with me.
Okay.
Did you say your name was Mr. Farrar, is that right?
I pronounce it Farrar.
Farrar. Did you submit a questionnaire?
No.
Okay. Do you work now?
Yes,
Where do you work?
worked at what used to be the atomic plant,
Okay. What do you do?
janitor,
And how long have you been there?
42 years.
Did you recognize any of the names that I read when I was going through the list of people who might be witnesses in this case?
No.
Okay. Any reason you can think of that you wouldn't be an appropriate juror for us or a fair and impartial juror for us?
No.
And, something I haven't done is at least talk about what this case is about. So, this case, the indictment in this case is 2 counts of aggravated murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. Back on October 30th of 2020, Tabitha Sheets was shot and killed at 216 and a half Ohio Avenue in Oak Hill, Ohio. David Healy was also shot and killed at 1475 Dark Hollow Road in Jackson County, Ohio. Paul Sheets, Tabitha's husband, was also shot in the head, but he survived. The defendant and his wife, Lisa Sheets, were charged with those crimes. This trial is simply about Lonnie Sheets. Does anybody here remember this? It happened on October 30th of last year. I see your answer. Did anybody else remember this? Like maybe being in the paper, and I see 2 hands over here and up here. Okay, well, let me start with Mr. Farrar and I'll kind of go from there. Do you remember reading about it in the newspaper or seeing it on the TV or what do you remember?
Hearing on the news reports, I think.
Okay. Anything beyond just hearing about it in the news?
Yeah, just
So, I spoke about earlier was the job of a juror. We ask you to come into this courtroom and made a determination on this case based solely on what you learned in this room. The judge will inform you about what all the relative law or the pertinent law is in our case, but the facts and evidence in our case are all gonna come from inside this room. So do you think you can kind of set aside that, whatever news report you heard and ignore it? Disregard it and just look at the facts and evidence that you hear here?
Yes.
Same thing would be true if you heard something on the street from somebody, or you heard a rumor or what have you. Can you set those things aside and just focus on the evidence that we present here? What is your name?
Daniel Birdie.
Okay. Do you remember?
Okay. It happened and that's.
So same question, you believe you can kind of set that stuff aside? Evidence that we present and the law that the judge gives you, but as far as what happened, right? The news report might say what happened, but we want you to focus on just what information you learned in this room. Is that something you think you can do?
Yes.
Would you agree sometimes news reports get it wrong?
Oh.
Yeah. Or sometimes things you hear on the street or whether it's a newspaper or news article, just people talking about it, sometimes they're mistaken. So it'd be important for us in a criminal to set all that stuff aside, just focus on the facts that are determined based on witnesses and evidence. Is that something you think you can do?
Yes.
Okay. Did you raise your hand?
I heard about it. I live in Oak Hill, so I heard.
Okay. You live in Oak Hill. Did you know the sheets? Did any of those names ring any bells for you?
No.
Okay. Same question. You think you can kind of set aside whatever you may have heard or read about this case before and just the facts as we give them to you, or the facts as they're presented to you by witnesses and evidence?
Yes.
Okay. And sir, you also raised your hand.
Just local media.
Okay. So same question. You think you can kind of set that stuff aside and just focus on the evidence that's presented in this courtroom? Okay. And then you raise your hand. What's your name?
Anna McDaniel.
Okay. And Ms. McDaniel, same question for you. Did you just hear about it on the street?
Just on the radio, yeah.
Radio reports. And again, you might not have heard more than 30 seconds about it on the radio, I'm imagining, but nevertheless, can you set any information you got, whether it's from news reports or any other source, set those things aside and just focus on what you hear in this room?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. McDaniel, do you think you could be a good juror for us in this case?
I think so, yeah.
What do you think would make a good juror?
I guess one who's trusting, honest, has an open mind. Has an open mind. Yeah.
What does it mean to you to be fair and impartial?
That's just, just trust that you are doing the process correctly, hearing both sides of the story, making a clear, conscious decision.
Yeah, I think you made some great points there, but I think one that's particularly important, you're willing to hear both sides of the story. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And that's, ma'am, what was your name?
Rebecca.
I was looking at her, but you guys were in line. What was your name?
Mine?
Yes.
Rebecca Davis.
Okay. And same question. Do you think you could be a good juror? Okay. Any reason you could think of that you might have trouble sitting with us? If I think the judge discussed, we might be going into next week with this trial. We certainly think we're gonna go into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. Is that gonna be a problem for you?
Not that I know, I just have to let my boss know.
And this goes for everybody. We appreciate that whoever winds up seated on this jury is going to be making some sacrifices, right? You probably didn't wake up today thinking, boy, I hope I get to go to court for the next 8 business days or whatever it may be. But we appreciate that everybody's making sacrifices. And I'm sure with the way I anticipate this going, I believe you'll be getting released today and you'll be asked to come back tomorrow. And I think that's when we'll actually figure out who the people are going to be paneled on this jury. So you'll have some time to alert your boss. And that goes for everybody. You also have maybe tonight to sort of get a heads up to to an employer or a family and make arrangements for stuff, because if you wind up coming in tomorrow and you're asked to be seated on this jury, we expect you're gonna be here basically, each work day, right, 8 to 5 for the rest of the week, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, next week. Does anybody have any issues or concerns about that? I'm gonna start on the left. You're too eager, so I'm gonna pick her. And I'm sorry, ma'am.
Allison Bryant.
I'm sorry?
Allison Bryant.
And what were your concerns?
Oh, no, previous question, I think I'm just hitting in the corner, you can't see my hand. I had just heard about it through word of mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I did miss some people I missed some people that raised. So I guess everybody who raised your hand on the publicity question, if I didn't speak to you about it, raise your hand now. You don't have to. Did I miss anybody else? I guess here's the question. I wouldn't be surprised if any of you heard about this. My guess is you probably didn't hear more than like a 30-second spiel on the radio or maybe a headline in the newspaper. And it's probably not going to have a whole lot of details to it. Is there anyone here who feels that if they saw that or were exposed to that sort of thing, that they wouldn't be able to set it aside and just focus on the information that's in this courtroom, that's presented in this courtroom? I'm going to take the silence for assent. Is there anybody who's puzzled by my question and didn't understand it? Okay. So same question for you on the publicity side. Do you think you could set aside whatever you heard or read and just focus on?
I mean, I just heard it by word of mouth. I was dropping my little one off at daycare,
Okay.
or with my mother, and she had mentioned that it had happened. And I believe that Tabitha may have taken care of my grandma at one point.
Okay.
Because that was our tie to it. I mean, my grandmother's been passed for 2 years.
In what capacity do you think she cared for your grandma?
We just paid for private in-home care, and she had been recommended by a friend who was working, so we were just paying for somebody to sit with.
Do you think that that is going to impair your ability to be fair and impartial in sitting in the case that involves Ms. Tabitha Sheets' death?
No, I mean, I wouldn't know her from Adam on the street. The only reason I tied that was because when my mom was telling me about it, she said, she used to take care of Meemaw when Meemaw was home. So that's the only way I would even.
What's your grandmother's name?
Martha
I'm sorry?
Miller.
Okay. So you didn't know, like prior to your mom saying it, you didn't know who she was and you didn't connect her with your grandmother anyway. Okay. But now having that information, would that impair your ability to be fair and impartial in this case at all? And ma'am, you are very eagerly, I appreciate that. You're very eagerly waving your hand at me. And
I've raised my hand a few times and never been.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
Trudy, please.
Okay, and what were you raising?
I work for the state,
Okay.
DOGD, and I have a couple of clients that I all have, and they won't allow other people in there, so for me to do that long of time.
And explain to me a little bit, for the record, what you do.
I work with developmental disabled.
Okay.
To
And do
live
you
in,
mind speaking up, because
I
the
work
air purifier, the air conditioner, and the guy who decided now's the time to mow, I want to make sure everybody can hear you, including the record.
I work with developmental disabled.
Mhm.
And I have two clients particularly who are very high behavior. And one lives by himself, but he has to have steady supervision, and he will only let me. His family, his sister, is an essential employee herself, she's an RN, so she can't miss work. So there's just very high behavior, and just, because usually I could arrange something.
And this is something you're doing in their home?
Yes.
So what do? You're actually going and spending, sitting, they have
Well,
to
I
have
have
some.
to take care of the child and also try to control his behaviors.
So when you say physically take care of the child, like he needs assistance using the bathroom and eating and things like that, I mean, just even the basics.
Yeah, he's nonverbal.
Okay. And you to do this, who is he, who are his caregivers?
He has his mother.
And is she, I'm sorry, did you say she's the one who's a worker? herself?
She is, and then the other client's sister is, yeah.
Oh, okay. So both of these are circumstances where, well, let me back up. The adult, is this the adult the same situation where he needs someone?
No, he's just, high behavior,
Mhm.
but he can live alone and he does. But I have to go in to make sure he has food, that he's preparing it properly, assisting him to prepare it, helping keep his own clean, keep him out of trouble. You know, and I am the only one he has, other than his sister.
Okay. And in both circumstances, the caregiver that would, if we were to ask you to sit in this jury, one of the issues would be the primary caregiver who we would expect to sort of step in and fill that role.
But with the juvenile, his mother would have to stay home, because no one else, the few times that they've tried, more than a few times, to bring someone in to back me up, it just, he had so many behaviors, he was pretty.
Karen, can we move for cause on her?
Yes.
Right now?
Yes.
I'd state
We're in agreement.
Okay. You know, your clients really can't do without you. I appreciate you coming in. Anything for work, we'd have that at the front office for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was your name?
Laura,
I'm sorry?
Laura,
And what's your last name?
Jeffries Wolfenden.
So Jeffries
Wolfenden,
Wolfen. It's Jeffries Wolfen. I'm gonna do that every time.
okay.
I haven't spoken to you, so I won't pick on you. Anything about the case that I've described thus far that gives you pause or you have any concerns?
No,
Because this is a murder case, one of the things we'll be doing is probably showing, we'll probably be hearing, we'll definitely be hearing from people who performed, doctors who performed autopsies, and you may see a couple photos from that. Graphs or anything like that, or graphic testimony that's gonna trouble you, or what do you do?
I'm actually a restaurant manager.
Okay. If you're asked to serve on this jury, and it goes from this weekend to next, is someone else gonna be able to pick up the slack at the restaurant?
It'd be difficult, but yes, they would.
Okay. And I appreciate that it's difficult, and I don't scoff at that by any stretch of the imagination. My assumption is that pretty much everybody who's gonna be seated on this jury is gonna suffer some hardship, right? They're gonna have to get someone to fill in for them at work, or they're gonna have personal responsibilities in their own life that they need like a family member to step in for. You're gonna have so people will pick up that slide.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think you would make a good juror?
I would hope so.
Why do you think you'd make a good juror?
I'm impartial, I believe, but I've never had to do anything like this before. I've always either worked or stayed at home with my kids, so.
Well, it's the first time for everything, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
The judge will instruct you that, in this case, he's gonna give you the law, and you're supposed to, the facts, you're make your determination, as when you make a determination as to guilt or not guilty. You're supposed to make that determination based on things you've seen here in this room. Do you think you can do that?
Yes.
Set aside anything, whether it's news reports from back when this happened, or if this gets covered in the newspaper tomorrow. Is that something you can ignore and just focus on what's going on in this room?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Your name, sir?
William.
Okay. And same question for you. Do you think you could be a good juror for us?
Yes.
Do you have any reservations about the subject matter that we're going to hear?
No.
Okay. If you think you'd be a good juror, why do you think you'd be a good juror?
I'm open-minded, I want to see both sides.
Okay. And that's what we're asking, basically. Sides are a pretty apt summation of what a jury is. Did you recognize any of the names that I described?
No.
Your name?
Jade Wyant.
I'm sorry?
Jade Wyant.
And the same question for you. Do you think you could be a good juror for us today?
Yes.
And why do you think so?
I didn't know.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to open my kids.
Anything concerning about what we've described in terms of the subject matter of the case?
No.
Or about the fact that the case is going to spill into next week, be all this week and spill into next week?
I'll just have to let my books know.
Where do you work?
Walmart.
Okay. Did you recognize any of the names that I've read before? Okay. Sir, your name?
Andrew Brown,
Okay. Do you have any reservations on serving on the jury?
no,
Do you think you'd be a good juror?
yes, sir.
And why do you think so?
Open-minded, fair and honest,
Did you recognize any of the names that I gave out earlier?
no, sir.
All right, we already spoke. I appreciate you being eager to speak a second time, but I think we already spoke. As the judge has indicated, so like, one of the things you do is juror sit. You'll be asked to come in this week, basically, more or less, I would expect you're gonna be here for me. There'll be breaks, there'll be a lunch break, for example, there'll be breaks during the day. You'll have opportunities to stand and so on and so forth. One of the things we're gonna ask folks to do is do a jury review in this case. So there are 2 scenes that you're gonna be asked to go to. One's to pick a jury, we'll do opening statements, and then we're gonna put folks, the people are gonna serve as our jurors are gonna go on a bus, school bus, and right after these 2 scenes, kill. Does anyone have a problem with jumping on a school bus? Right. I did it recently, and I can tell you can jostle around. The other thing we'll be doing is at Ohio Avenue, it's kind of tight. The streets in the neighborhood are too narrow, so school buses can. Does anybody have any concerns with that? And I ask just because, some folks complain we often get about sitting, just people with back problems. But I don't know if anybody else had any medical conditions that would give you pause and you could walk up the hill or ride on the school bus when that happens. Anyone have any concerns with that? Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Toy?
Thank you very much. I'm Bob Toy, and I'm from Athens, Ohio, where we go to school. Okay? And I've been doing this for about 43 years. So I did this before there was DNA. That tells you how long that was. There was no such thing. At that time, I was a prosecuting attorney, and I did that for 15 years over in Athens County. I know one of you personally, that's James, represented you. Is that any problem with my representation?
Right.
Can you give me a recommendation here? Okay. We got along pretty good. Is that gonna be a problem for us if we did a civil case together? Is that correct?
That, it will not be a problem.
Okay, not for them either?
That's not for anyone.
I know you, James. You're working over still at the treatment plant, is that correct? Okay. How long have you been there now?
Since July.
Since July? Okay. And you've not sat in a jury trial before, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so you're gonna see me in a little different venue than over in, I think it was Judge Reagan was over there at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, he was over in a different courtroom too, is that correct? Okay. When we're doing this, there are no wrong answers. This is for you to tell me, and when I talk to you, let's pretend like we're having a one-on-one conversation, because I'm representing Lonnie's interest here. And what I'm trying to do is, everybody comes in with preconceived notions and thinking, what they might know and so forth, and they hear, set it aside, burdens of proof. But I want to talk to you. It's Ms. Wolfington, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. You work at McDonald's as a manager, is that correct? Sometimes people come in and give you excuses, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't work today, I can't do this, whatever it is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes,
You sometimes have to judge somebody's credibility,
yes.
and what are the factors you do when you judge somebody's credibility?
How many times have they said that to, buddies being with them the night before?
Would it be another thing when a story makes sense?
Yeah,
What if they were high on drugs when they told you the story? That might give you a problem?
yeah.
What if, anybody else, how about you, sir? You're a corrections officer where at?
Louisville.
Which one?
Louisville?
Oh my goodness, okay. You working there now? I did the prison riot case back in '93. You weren't working there, you're too young for that, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's a tough place to work. Is that still Max?
Yes.
Okay, well, you're big enough to work there, I'll tell you that. How long you been working there?
14 years.
Wow, okay. Does that give you got the toughest of the tough, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a difficult job. Okay. Knowing, do you think in this case, since it's a murder case, and it's not some receiving stolen property or theft case, this might give you, that you've got people, murderers, rapists, down there in Lucasville right now, that's your main population, is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
understand that. Is that gonna give you a particular problem serving as a juror in this case? Okay, I'm gonna ask you some more questions, okay? Because you're a corrections officer, I was a prosecutor, we've got different views of things sometimes now that I'm a defense attorney. What do you think about the presumption of innocence when you deal with an individual? And you're sitting here with Lonnie, what's he guilty of? What's he doing? He's innocent right now?
Yes.
Whose job is it to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
To prove him guilty, the prosecutor.
The state. Okay. Your understanding of that, is that correct? What if he doesn't testify in this case? Would you hold that against him?
That's his choice.
Okay. You understand that under the Constitution?
Yes.
Did you take any special law enforcement training classes? I used to train police officers back in the old days. Did you have that also?
I mean, I served on the SRT for 4 years.
Got it. Tell them what that is.
The special response team.
Dealing with the tough situations, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. That's impressive, that you did that, quite frankly. Thank you for your service on that, that's a tough job. Who sits here and watches Dateline or murder mysteries on TV? Anybody? Nobody watches Dateline? No, none of the murder mysteries, nothing else like that? You do?
Yeah.
Which show you like best? Dateline?
Yeah, Dateline, and there's these other ones on these other channels, me and my wife watch them.
On
We
Netflix?
record them, yeah.
Okay. And they all start out with a little mystery at the beginning, is that correct?
Yeah, they go to talk about the family history and how things led to things, and then they have some of how they found them guilty, and
Well, as you can note, we're not gonna finish this in 55 minutes like those TV shows do. You understand?
yes.
This is gonna be like a 10-part, got it?
Yeah.
And that's how we're gonna be going. This is gonna take a long time to go through. And so when you're watching those shows and so forth, do you understand that your job as a juror to critique the evidence, to listen to it, and to see if a reasonable doubt is evident in your mind at the end of a case? You believe that that's what you think you can do in this case?
Yes.
Okay. When you deal with credibility of witnesses, this one of their main witnesses in a case was an active drug user and seller. Would that cause you some questions about his credibility?
No.
No? Okay. Would you listen to him?
Yes.
Why wouldn't that cause you some questions about credibility?
It determines if it's part of the case or not.
Okay. You want to listen to what he says.
I want to listen to what he said.
Then see if he's consistent in what he says. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is it Mr. Andrews?
Andrews, yes. sir.
Andrews, I'm sorry. I didn't have a question there. You say you're a business owner, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, what business do you own?
I own Premier Painting and I own a couple of real estate buildings here now.
Okay, you local here?
Correct.
And, are you married?
I am
You have kids? Two. Okay, how old are they?
33 and 30.
They work with us.
We work within our organization.
You've got the business going on. And where are you centered at? Because I'm from Athens, I'm not that
We're here in Jackson. I own a building right across the street. It was Boardwalk Building, and then Premier Painting is located just south of town in Jackson.
Okay, so you know all the sheriffs and cops, so.
I can't say all, but I know
Most of them.
Sure.
You know Ted, the sheriff, is that
I
correct? Okay. I've been on this case a short time. County Sheriff's Office, I shouldn't say it, but I am. Fine officers. But do you know somebody who might have, or an officer that could have tunnel vision or thinking about this is what happened and look for evidence that only supported that theory of a case?
Do I know one?
Yeah. Or have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
How about you, sir?
I don't know.
Okay. Let's say it's a DUI case, and somebody comes up and they said, oh, he was fumbling with his license, and that's evidence of his intoxication. Did you think of an alternative theory by somebody might fumble with a license?
No.
No? That maybe he was nervous?
No.
Okay, all right. Sir, do you believe that my client has a right not to testify in this case?
Sure.
Did you hold that against him?
No.
Would you want to hear from him at all?
If it was pertinent to the case, sure. But it's his right not to.
Okay. Do you have any problem with that, Ms. Edwards?
No.
Okay. When we deal with presumption of the evidence, when you have the burden of proof, that basically means that if the state's accusing you of something, that you did something and point their finger at you, would you expect the state to back that up with sufficient proof to find you guilty?
Yes.
I think that's layman's terms. Now, you're in the Army National Guard, is that correct?
I am.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been in for a year, a couple months.
Okay, I think you're our youngest juror. Are you still 18?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I won't pinpoint anybody who's the oldest juror. But can you tell me, sir, are you still going to school? Are you at Ryan?
Yes, sir.
What are you doing there?
I'm going into the nursing program this fall.
Okay. And obviously you have not sat in a case like this before.
No.
Okay. You voted, got on the jury list, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you think when you walked into the courtroom and you saw Mr. Sheets? What did you think at that point in time? Did you say, I wonder what he did?
Yeah, I have a clue.
Okay. Do you understand that at this time he's presumed innocent?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you think is important when you look at somebody's credibility?
How it ties into the story.
Internal consistency?
Yes, sir.
Can you see a situation where an officer, a good officer, might have a theory of a case and not do some things that they should have done to look at all the evidence? Have you heard of that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I can't go into the details, but if indeed the evidence comes out that something's missing, something wasn't done that should have been done, is that something you consider if you go back and you are selected as a juror in this matter?
Yes, if they're not including something that's correct.
Right. Okay. And how about you? You're a student at OU,
Yes.
and I think you were taking language, is that correct?
Yes.
Language arts, what is that?
Like a middle high school English teacher.
Okay, good. And how long have you been doing that?
This is my first year.
First year? Okay. Are you from Jackson here originally?
Yes.
And do you live at Ohio University?
No, I live in Jackson.
You go back and forth, commute? Okay. Then you work, I think, at Walmart part-time, is that correct?
Yes.
Have you, the magnitude of what we're dealing with here, when you're dealing with a murder case, did you know what you were summoned for when you came in today? Okay. How's that week and a half going to affect your ability, or 2 weeks, to be a juror? What are you doing right now during the summertime?
I just finished finals, so the only thing I would affect is work.
It's just work, and you can make arrangements for that?
Yeah.
Okay. When you judge somebody's credibility, what do you look at? What do you think? When somebody tells you something, how do you know if they're telling you the truth or not?
You can consistency, perhaps.
Consistency?
Yeah.
Okay. When you deal with proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the judge is going to instruct you on that and tell you that part of the definition is that you would use it in the most important. A reasonable doubt is one that, to your certainty, it deals with something that you would make a big decision about. What would that be that you've done? Choosing a college?
Yes. Yeah, I'd say probably just choosing.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, when you buy your businesses or run your businesses, you have situations where you have to have critical situations where you need to examine what's going on. When you do that, do you explore what's going on? Do you look into, you buy a building and you get title insurance for that?
Sure.
Okay, and why do you do that?
To make sure my investment is protected.
Okay. And when you have decided to buy something, did you explore all the possibilities when you did that?
I can't say I've always explored every possibility, but I certainly attempt to.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, is that correct?
Sure.
That's something that is, when you got married, you both knew each other. You just didn't pick somebody up on the first date. You explored each other. You talked to each other. Is that correct? Found out what each other's interests were.
Yeah, and 40 years later, I'm still stuck with it.
If you asked to describe yourself, if I'm asking you, because we've not met before, what would make you a good juror in this case? Tell me about that. What are your qualifications?
Open-minded, pretty good listener. I like to dissect most of what I hear and see. Pretty straightforward, extremely straightforward.
If things should have been done that weren't done, could you listen to that? Would that be something?
Sure.
And Mr. Sherwood, how about you? If things were done or weren't done that you think should have been done, to give you all the evidence, would that concern you?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like all the evidence available?
Yes.
Okay. And again, in this case, when we deal with proof beyond a reasonable doubt, it's a proof as to all the elements of the case. And the court's going to explain what elements are. If you're missing one of the elements, it's sort of like when you bake a cake, Ms. Edwards, you ever bake a cake?
It's been a while, but.
Okay. If you don't have an ingredient in there, what happens? The cake fails, is that correct?
First cake, probably.
So if indeed the state doesn't prove all the elements of the offense, everything that they're supposed to prove, like one of the elements that happened in the state of Ohio, they're gonna be able to prove that. But there are other elements of an offense, because there are various ones here, they fail to prove that. Then they failed in their case, just like if you fail to bake a cake properly. You understand that concept? Ms. Davis, you work at Holzer.
Yes.
Are you the pharmacy tech?
Yep.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've only been to Texas this summer, but I worked at Boulder for 4 years.
Okay. So that you have an important job, is that correct? If things aren't done properly there, people can get harmed, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you do when you do your job? What do you do to make sure things are being done correctly?
We detect to put the prescriptions in, and the pharmacist always double checks that we did it, and then when we're counting it, we have a computer system that double checks that we have the right medication, and then the pharmacist also redouble checks what the computer system has.
And you always ask for the date of birth.
Always ask for date of birth per minute.
All right, I understand that. And you do that for people's protection, is that correct? Okay. If in this case, things weren't done that should have been done by the police, not that they were bad, but maybe because they had one version of events or one theory of events, would you look at that?
Yes.
Because you deal with that on a daily basis, precision, is that correct? And sometimes in a criminal trial, things may not be so looked at. Would that concern you?
They're not home stuff yet.
Okay. I'm not gonna pick on you, but I'm back. I read your, and had a little concern because you indicated that it said, can you serve as a juror? And it put down, you said you would have difficulty because you have some physical problems. And I want to, if we need to, we can go back in here and you don't have to be a jury. Would that be preferable for you?
No.
No, you can do it here? I just saw your form and it said that you weren't able to sit here and that your medication would affect you from being a juror. Tell me more about that, if you will.
Sitting. But when the judge said we'd be able to take breaks and things, the nurse, so I can use my hands, from my neck, I mean, the nurse on my neck.
Okay. Are you able to hear well enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And you've lived here in Jackson County all your life?
Except for 10 years.
Okay. And you mentioned that your father was a police officer?
Yes.
And where at?
Wellston, okay.
And when did he stop being a police officer?
Years.
Years ago? Okay. And so you grew up in Wellston, and do you have any other friends who are law enforcement?
Just my, extended family, my uncle was a sheriff here in Jackson.
Oh, that's right. And what year was he sheriff?
Oh,
Long time ago?
long time ago.
Oh, you'd
Yes,
be surprised.
they're retired, long time. And I have two, now cousins who are state patrolmen.
Are they still state patrolmen? Or
No,
they
like
done?
I said, they're older than me, and I'm pretty.
Okay, good enough. All right. You're not one of those individuals who likes to watch Dateline like
Absolutely.
myself and Mr. Sherwood here. We watch those all the time. You don't watch those at all?
No, I like to watch things that, documentaries, things I get knowledge from. I wanna know about everything,
Okay.
you know, all the bits and pieces of it.
Well, then let me ask you, if there are things that, when at the conclusion of this case, are going, I wish this had been done, or maybe they should have done this, would that concern you at the conclusion of the case, and if the state's not been able to prove in your own mind that things that should have been done weren't done? Could that raise a reasonable doubt in your mind?
Absolutely.
Lonnie not testifying. Don't you want to hear both sides of the story?
I think, I would like to hear both sides of the story, but that's his choice. And if he doesn't want me to hear
That's
his side, then.
What do you think about the presumption of the evidence? Here, North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, you don't have the presumption of innocence. Do you think that's a good system?
Well, no.
What's that?
No, everyone should be presumed innocent until they're proven.
Until they're proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's all of it, one.
Well, I had that burden. I did it for 15 years, and you have to convince all 12. Do you believe that if you're on the jury, we've got the youngest person on the jury, and you two are on it together, you're gonna be able to discuss things to each other?
Oh, absolutely.
How do you feel?
I think so.
Well, you're the Army National Guard. I think you'd be able to do that. And how about you as a middle school teacher?
Yes.
Okay, that's the toughest job on earth, isn't it? Why would you want to do that? That's great, though. I appreciate that, being a middle school teacher. And it's I'm sorry, right here, it's Mr. Brown. Okay, you indicated you had some problems with your studies that you had to leave. Is that correct?
Correct.
Didn't feel that. Is it something that's so important that you can't give it up for a week or 2 weeks? If it is, just tell me.
Yeah, well, it's all hands-on. I won't be able to go back and finish. Like this week, I'm in finals week. I have 3 finals.
You got them this week.
Yeah, one's like right now up in Hawking. And then I start a new semester Monday, so this coming Monday. So I won't be able to go back and finish what I missed this week, and then I'm going to miss what I'm starting next week.
Your Honor, we have no problem to excuse them.
All right, so I thank you for coming in. We're going to excuse you.
Okay.
Good luck on your finals.
Thank you.
And Ms. Bryant,
Yes,
as a RN, you've been doing that now, you were an RN, you're a nurse recruitment now, is that correct?
yes, I was an ER nurse for 7 years, and then I moved into human resources a little over a year ago. And I'm intermittently in the ERs.
Do you see people, or did see people, who came in who were affected by the use of meth and heroin, is that correct or not?
Absolutely,
All the time?
very frequently.
Would that affect their credibility with you?
No,
Why not?
they're still a human.
I understand that.
And
I'm just talking about what they might remember or what they might be able to recount. Would that give you an issue?
Like when they were giving me like their patient history or,
You're just talking about things that might have happened if they were still high.
oh, no,
Okay, why is that?
because usually they still know what they're talking about, depending on what type of drug they're on. I mean, if they're awake and alert, then,
Awake and alert.
right,
Okay. And would it matter to you when you're dealing with them if there's some internal inconsistency about their story, their credibility?
I mean, if they're not being consistent, you would question their credibility.
Okay, and that would give you a concern, is that correct? Okay. So Lonnie sits here today, what does he presume?
And
Okay? And who will you put the burden on to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt?
it's
And if they failed to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, what would your verdict be at that time?
if they fail to prove it beyond reasonable doubt,
And have you bought a home in your life?
yes,
When you bought it, did you have, probably, you had some doubts about whether you could afford it. But other than that, when you bought it, did you believe that you were making the right decision?
yes,
You explored it, is that correct?
yes, I went and looked at it 3 or 4 times, I paid for a private inspection.
Inspection, and you got that done. And then after that, that was something that was one of the most important things in your life, a big decision to make, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Is there anybody here who feels that they can't sit for 2 weeks on the jury? Okay, I pass for Counselor, thank you.
State pass for cause as well?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're doing jury selection a little differently because of COVID. I can't fill the courtroom with people like we normally would. So we've had to bring you in groups of no more than 19. So we have done your initial round of questioning today. I'm going to have you come back tomorrow morning at 9:15. When you come in, you'll be waiting in the hallway. What we will do is we will finish the jury selection process then, and you'll know whether or not you make it on the jury. Now, between now and then, I need you not to look at any newspaper stories about this case, anything on the radio, anything on the television, anything on the internet. People try to talk to you about the case. You can't talk to them about it. Someone tries to tell you something about the case. You can't hear that because you haven't heard any evidence yet. And as you've heard during the jury selection process, we don't decide these cases on what's in the newspaper, on the radio, or talk on the street. It's on the evidence here in the courtroom, and you haven't heard any evidence yet. So, does anyone have any questions before I let you go? All right, so we'll have you in the hallway tomorrow morning by 9:15. Thank you.